As all of you are aware, Mr. Fitzpatrick needs no introduction to the cashew and agri-products ecosystem globally. He is an award-winning nuts and dried fruit specialist, a well-known personality for his ACA Cashew webinar, which attracts more than 500 participants and has run for more than 60 editions. He is the author of more than 25 studies and is a regular contributor to cashew publications. It's time to bask in his unlimited, bottomless wisdom about cashew. Let's give a round of applause to Mr. Jim Fitzpatrick.
I'm going to talk to you quickly about policy. We're going to talk about particularly the lessons learned from policy and some of the trends over recent years. So let's just think about the challenge for regulators and policymakers. And particularly last year we saw real evidence of the difficulty of this challenge. Balancing national priorities, balancing the needs of farmers and other stakeholders against the needs of customers. And we saw this particularly in the situation in the management of the raw cashewnut chain by regulators in 2024. This is not an easy task. It's a task that's been marked by success and often by failure in the past, going back to the 1980s, in fact. So let's not underestimate it. We've seen a lot of changes in policy in recent years. We've seen proactive, mostly reactive policies. Let's just look at some of those briefly. So if we consider in Mozambique, for example, the introduction of a tax on Burma kernels. Highly innovative. Not done anywhere else. In Tanzania, bringing the auction online, and how successful that was this year. In West Africa, we've seen the introduction of the export ban in Benin, with various impacts, some success, but some great difficulties too related to that. We're seeing now in Ghana the introduction of a cashew policy, and probably the introduction of some regulatory measures in the coming years. And of course, in Cote d'Ivoire last year, controversially, we saw the suspension of exports, which changed the market. For some, for good, for others, it cost them huge losses. So throughout the whole sector, we see volatility in policy. If we take the example of Guinea-Bissau last year, changes in the organization of the internal chain sent more product through the port of Bissau rather than informally across the border into Senegal or the Gambia. Over the years, we see a lot of changes in policy. And if we look at it going back to 2008, when the Tanzanian auction first came into play, it appears to be increasing. The auction, the introduction of minimum pricing regimes, taxation of raw cashewnut exports, almost everywhere today, one or two exceptions, increasing support for processors, most notably the introduction of the subsidy in Cote d'Ivoire in 2018. And as we come toward the end of our list, the list gets longer. Governments are more and more intervening in the sector. They're intervening with policy, and they're becoming more and more interventionist in an ad hoc way, which is difficult for people in business and may bring unintended consequences. What's happened in the market in the same period is we've seen this boom in the raw cashewnut trade. We've seen closure of the Indian, or the effective closure of the Indian cashew kernels market to imports of kernels. We've seen increasing buyer needs related to sustainability, food safety, human rights. We've seen volatile pricing. No one will forget 2016 through to the end of 2017. And of course, we've seen COVID. So challenging times for everyone, and particularly for regulators who are being asked to more and more intervene in the sector at times of greater and greater volatility. And the problem is, how do you do this? Is it really related to the realities of the market? And when I look at it, I think Let's start with the baseline of market volatility, something we've come to accept in the cashew business. Market volatility combined with the failure of market information systems, or a lack of market information systems, or an unwillingness to take the messages from market information systems, leads to a kind of policy that can be short-term, that can be full of unintended impacts. If we think about it, I'm quite sure that regulators of the raw cashew nut trade had no intention to damage the investment reputation of their countries when they introduced those regulations. I'm quite sure that regulators in one country had no intention to send their best cashew nuts to a neighbouring country to be processed. So if we don't really understand how our market works, it's very difficult to regulate, balancing those domestic priorities and the international realities of the market. So what we've seen over recent years, I would put it more regulation, less harmonization. More complexity in regulation, greater divergence between countries. So types of policy are moving apart, not together. We've seen an increasing level of ad hoc interventions. See a problem, fix a problem, don't worry about the next day. And this, of course, leads to greater and greater difficulties in implementation. If you don't implement today's policies well, why introduce a new policy to create a greater challenge for tomorrow? And this is a really serious question that I'm looking forward to asking some of our regulators during the session. So a lot of people would say that these interventions are supporting inefficiency, that they're compromised by unrealistic targets, that they bring along unintended consequences, that they're volatile and unpredictable. In 2024, that would have been correct. And people would say that what works now may not work in the long term. We have to be sustainable in our policies, and sustainability doesn't just mean environmental sustainability. So the mix of policy, volatile markets, politics, and our changing, globalizing environment makes policy difficult. And it is easy to ask these questions. It is easy to criticize regulators and policymakers, but we shouldn't underestimate the job that they have to do. So we're going to move to our session next. Maybe think about some of those points and come up with some questions toward the end of our session. Thank you.
It's time for me to quickly start inviting our guests as I give you their brief profiles. They're very illustrious, some of them are very illustrious, very distinguished guests that will be joining us up here. And they've had a long career span across cashew and other agri-commodities. And you will get to read their detailed profiles in the My Eventel app. That is how technology makes your life easier, and that is how it makes my life easier as well. It's time for me to start enumerating our panelists, and joining us on the stage with Mr. Fitzpatrick will be Mr. Mamadou Berte, the Director General of the Cotton and Cashew Council, CCA, of Ivory Coast. Also joining us on the stage will be the Director, APEDA India, the former Director, APEDA India, presently the Director of BEDF. Please put your hands up for Dr. Tarun Bajaj. Dr. Tarun Bajaj is the Director, APEDA, for the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, with more than 28 years of experience. Mr. Dara from CCF Cambodia would be joining us on the stage. Mr. Dara is the President of CCF and also a founder of Ample Agro Product Company Limited. Our next panelist this morning will be Mr. Alfred Francis, DG CBT Tanzania, the Director General of the Cashewnut Board of Tanzania, who is driving the growth of Tanzania's cashewnut industry. Our next speaker this morning will be Mrs. Berte Viskov, the project leader for GIZ-MOVE. Let's welcome her with a round of applause, everyone. Our next speaker on this panel will be Mr. Bach Nhut, currently serving as the Standing Vice President of VINACAS and the Chief Executive Officer of BK & Company Limited, Vietnam, which is a cashew service company of his own. The next panelist on stage, I'm inviting Dr. Forster Boateng, the CEO of the Tree Crop Development Authority, TCDA Ghana, leading efforts to develop and regulate key tree crops including cashew, mango, shea, oil palm, coconut, and rubber. Our next speaker, the Executive Director of ETG. He has been a core management member since 1997. As you're all aware, ETG is one of the leading international players in the agriculture supply chain, and they are one of the most respected agri-commodities and agri-input stakeholders in Africa and the globe, operating in more than 50 countries globally with a turnover of $8 billion. Mr. Vasudev Barkur is the Executive Director of ETG. Our next speaker on the panel will be Ms. Lúcia Sebastião António. She is the head of the industry section at the Institute of Nuts of Mozambique, an agronomist with a master's in global and food agribusiness from Adelaide University. Ms. Lúcia brings us great insights into this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, I now hand over this session to Mr. Fitzpatrick. I wish you a great interaction ahead. Please remember to use Slido, which could be your great partner in making this panel a great interactive one. Thank you.
Well, welcome to this session. What a panel. We have representatives from the 5 leading producing countries. We have representatives from the 2 leading processing countries. We have a representative of one of the most successful private sector companies in our business. We have a representative of what I think is the most successful development project in the history of the cashew sector. The way we're going to do this is we're going to have a discussion, or chat, as we'd say in Ireland. We're going to talk about policy. So I'm going to ask some questions of our regulators, and then I'm going to ask our other panelists to respond to those. And I'm asking all of you come forward and ask us some questions toward the end of the session. If you found the regulation last year difficult, ask about it. If you found the organization of the sector frustrating, ask about it. So let me start by, in which case, I would like to start by asking our panelists in the, let's say, producing, exporting RCN countries about what the priorities in their countries are for cashew policy. So the question is, what are the 3 priorities for policy and regulation in your country for the cashew export sector? And we're going to start with Mamadou Berte, the Director General of CCA in Côte d'Ivoire.
Découlent de la nouvelle vision que nous avons aujourd'hui au niveau de la filière anacarde. Cette vision, essentiellement, c'est de valoriser le potentiel de la filière anacarde pour que des producteurs soient maintenant prospères. Et quand je dis prospères, cela passe par, le premier point, c'est d'avoir des revenus décents et améliorer leurs conditions de vie. Le deuxième point, c'est d'accroître la transformation locale. Et je dirais, pour objectif immédiat, c'est de passer à 50% pour 2030. Et enfin, le dernier point pour nous, c'est de faire la promotion de la durabilité à travers tout ce qui est politique RSE. Donc, voici un peu décliné les objectifs essentiels au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire. Merci.
Thank you very much. Staying in West Africa, moving to the neighboring country, Ghana, Forster Boateng of the Tree Crops Development Authority. What are your 3 priorities?
Thank you, Jim. First of all, good morning, everyone. Let me make a quick disclaimer here. I think my title as CEO has changed now, so I'm no more the CEO, but I manage a project for the World Bank. But I was the former Deputy CEO for Tree Crop Development Authority. As of 18 February my position changed. So let me make that correction. Quick, let me go to 3 areas that government of Ghana is looking for in the cashew sector. Is 1, sustainable production. Sustainable production that will give remunerative prices to farmers and making sure that farmers are competitive and also making sure that we are socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable in production of cashew. The second point is also about looking at trade, because Ghana have been experiencing increasing transit trade. And for us, it's good and bad. It's good because we see a lot of transactions going on at our ports, though we are not charging port taxes, but it brings a lot of incentives to government when it comes to people using the facilities. But one bad thing is it's also diluting the quality that we have because we are not able to track. And therefore, there's a need to really look at data analytics to be able to track what kind of trade, that transit trade that goes through Ghana's ports. Point number 2. Point number 3 is looking at RCN quality. How can we enhance quality of RCN? So these are the 3 most priorities of my country. Thank you.
Forster, thank you very much. So we're hearing about sustainability, we're hearing about development in processing, we're hearing about a little bit of innovation in policy, which is refreshing compared to what we've seen in the past. So let's move to East Africa, to Mozambique, in fact. Lucia, what are the priorities, the 3 major priorities in Mozambique for the cashew sector?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here. In Mozambique, our key priorities are focused on inclusion, sustainability, and poverty alleviation. Based on our main challenge, which is ages of cashew tree, recurring disease outbreaks, the commercialization system, logistics, and climate change, we have set 3 main priorities for the next 10 years. Number 1 is to increase production, productivity, and quality of raw cashewnut. Number 2 is to improve and expand the assistance, technical assistance to the cashew actors, especially the small orders. And number 2 is the revitalization of the domestic industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so one thing about policy, which we hear in Mozambique, is that you need to adapt your policy to the conditions and the circumstances of your sector. There's no such thing as one policy fits all. And there's innovation there. Where there's also innovation is in Tanzania with the auction I mentioned earlier. Francis Alfred, what are the 3 priorities for Tanzanian cashew policy?
Thank you. Thank you, Jim, and all the participants. Our priorities has been mainly on the production side and on the marketing side of cashew. On the production side, what we've done, we have introduced the subsidy system for farmers. In East Africa, we are facing pests and diseases. So we produce a subsidy system for the inputs which are used to control pests and diseases. And the subsidy which has been there for 3 years now, we are going to the 4th year, have contributed significantly to increasing our production from 3,010 last year. Now this year we've produced 528,000 metric tons this year. So the presence of subsidy at 100% to our farmers has been one of the priorities to make sure farmers are able to produce significant amounts so that during selling they can benefit from the crop. And we have seen the results from the increase in production this year as compared to the previous one. But also, now we've been focusing on extension services. Now, for example, we've employed 500 graduates who will be working in every ward which grows cashew in Tanzania. So we want to make sure that farmers getting extension services properly so that they can know what to do in the farming. Our intention is to increase productivity so that farmers can benefit more from the crop. So that is from the production side. From the market side, We've introduced a more transparent and a more convenient system of selling cashew through online marketing. And we started last season, which now is coming to an end, and we've seen that it has got a positive impact to the buyers. Buyers from anywhere, they were able to participate through online auction, and it enabled us to have a stable prices throughout the season, because the average price per kilogram this time was around Tanzanian shillings 3,100 per kilogram, which was the highest. So the introduction of transparent TMX, selling cash through online, has been one of the major priority. But also, this season we enforced much on quality. So in every warehouse which collects cashew for the auction, we put a supervisor to make sure that cashew which is being sold to buyers is of high quality. And most of the buyers which participated in the cashew season this time in Tanzania, they benefited through that one. Our intention is to increase production, to have a transparent system of marketing, but also want to improve processing. So we've got primary market for the processors, and this time we're going to put even more incentive for those processors. Our intention is to have a reliable and a sustainable marketing system in Tanzania. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're talking about increasing production, transparency, innovation, and building a better production system. Well, the evidence is there in the last year. So coming to probably the newest of the major producers, Cambodia, and Dara is the president of the Cambodian Cashew Federation. What are the priorities in Cambodia for cashew policy?
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. First of all, I would like to say very good morning, His Excellency and ladies and gentlemen that take a very good time to come to join the World Cashew Conference today. And you might remember that we did a World Cashew Conference in Cambodia last year. So in Cambodia, it's very clear that we now are the second largest producing country. Even we export the raw cashew nut to Vietnam now, about 820,000 tons of the raw cashew nut. So our policy is also very clear. We have like 3 points. One is about the increase and sustain the production basing on the unique varieties called M23, which is we really don't focus on that one. And number 2 is about processing. We want to process our existing raw cashew nut up to 25% by 2027 and 50% by 2032. Clear. And then the third one, we want to increase our export market, not only the raw cashew nut, but we want to increase the cashew kernel, export cashew kernel to the giant importing country like US, Europe, China, and Middle East. So what we want for the market, we just want to get a transparent market, which is support. You know, we are talking about sustainability, talking about the unique product. We are talking about like a value-added product, but we do need reliable buyer who really want to support that one, not just talk about the pricing competition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So what we're hearing about from everyone is more production, greater sustainability, more value addition. Pretty much everyone says the same. I'm very interested though, what does sustainability mean in this context? Is it just a buzzword or is there something else behind it? We all use it. What does it mean? But let's come back to the 2 countries that are the biggest importers, the biggest processors, and in the case of India, the biggest consumer of cashews. And what I want to ask is, how do these policy priorities that you've heard, how do they fit with the development, the ambitions for the Vietnamese cashew sector and the Indian cashew sector? So starting with Vietnam.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning, everybody. And I'm very honored to be here and on behalf of VINACAS to share with you some comment, some good points. And We're hearing all the priority from the producing countries, and we are respecting on way the priority from the producing country, and especially from Ivory Coast and Cambodia, the two biggest partner with Vietnam. And last year we imported around 2.5 million metric tons from all over the world, and around 133,000 metric tons of Boma Cashewnut. Maybe Vietnam is the biggest one of importer right now. And we wish to strengthen the collaboration with the producing country, and we are in respect to the priority of all the producing country, from the supporting for the farmer, local farmer, and other policy. But we only have one key point over here. Last year, Vietnamese company have to face a lot of difficulty due to the export ban from some country, like Cote d'Ivoire and Benin. And a lot of companies have to face the difficulty so fast. Yes, you know, I shared the point yesterday at the closed door meeting. And on clear, Vietnam is open country. And we are the market-oriented economy. Market-oriented economy. And we towards the key point, the key goal, it's like the American and USA, American and Europe country. So we hope that producing country do the same. Market-oriented economy. And we will have no barrier. We should be open, and no export ban so far, and no export ban in the future. Yeah, we hope no restriction to everybody, even for the producer, for processor, exporter, and importer as well. And thank you so much.
Thank you. So now we get to an interesting issue, and this comes back to our question of balancing national needs and priorities with the demands of the international market and what customers need. So let's come to India. Dr. Tarun Bajaj of APEDA. How do you feel these policies fit with the long-term ambitions and priorities of the Indian cashew sector?
Thank you very much. As far as the priorities relating to quality improvement is concerned, we welcome it. We welcome that priority of most of our friends said. They also said they have the priority of transparency. We again welcome it. We want there should be as much transparency as possible. Our friends also said that they want to do more and more innovations. We welcome it. We welcome that also. We want more and more innovations. We ourselves are working towards it, and we encourage it. We are ready to partner with them. We are ready to spend our energies, resources to join hands with them in more and more innovations are concerned. They talked of sustainability. We welcome it. We are with them. We also want sustainability as far as concerned. They are also priorities. They said they want to increase the production. We again welcome it, because in your initial comments, in the initial keynote address, it was mentioned, and the rate of growth of demand and the rate of growth of supply, there is coming to be imbalance. So if this is the priority to improve production, we welcome it. But in order to achieve these priorities, the actions also has to be in the same way. We have to move in the actions with same to achieve these priorities. If there are ad hoc interventions, which you mentioned, Jim, in your comments, these ad hoc interventions of banning, of stopping supply chain, affecting supply chain, or not allowing the first crop to be exported, and such kinds of ad hoc measures which are introduced as a barrier in the supply chain, they are not, I'm sorry to say, are in line with the goal or the priorities which are mentioned and highlighted. Because these priorities require transparency. As it says, transparency means there is supply chain and it is transparent. So ad hoc measures which are adopted, they definitely are affecting the supply chain. We align with our partners. We welcome them. They want to improve their processing. We harmonize with them. We want to harmonize with them. We want healthy competition. We don't want that the competition should remain in one place only. Because we believe, as Mr. Rahul Kamath mentioned in his initial comments, that we want to increase more and more demand as far as possible. And he also supported generic demand, increase in the generic demand. Because in our country also we have seen the demand of, it is that demand of cashews are increasing, but the rate of demand of other nuts, whether it is almonds, pistachios, their demand growth rate is higher than the cashews. So we feel we need to do something to generate more and more demand and let everybody, there should be a healthy competition and less ad hoc measures to block the supply chain in that scheme. That is our request, and we feel the priorities which I have mentioned also require there should not be any ad hoc measures in affecting the supply chain. Thank you.
So now we're seeing the buyers asking for market access, open market access, open economies. Don't mess with my supply chain. And the regulators saying, it's not your supply chain, it's our supply chain. And we're going to look after the people in our own country in the way we need to look after the people in our own country. It's reconciling those two where the challenge lies. Now let's go to the private sector and get a view on this. Vasudev Parker, Executive Director of ETG, what do you think the priorities should be?
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, panel members, Anju. As someone who has seen Africa for years, I'm in Africa for last 30 years. So I lived in Tanzania, and I've extensively traveled in West Africa, so I know most of the terrains where cashew is produced. A lot of good things have happened in the last decade plus. Production of African region has, from 500,000 ton, we are touching almost 3 million ton and sometimes surpass 3 million ton. And we also seen a consistent increment in processing. So I should acknowledge that a lot of good things have happened in the last decade. And in the recent past, also we are seeing further improvements in some of the geographies, especially Tanzania, where I lived and I understand it very well. The production was, it was around 70,000, now it has touched 400,000 plus last year. I think great job done. I think kudos, and the kind of system they have brought in, which is an example for the entire probably fraternity at large. Now coming back to what people like us who has interest in our own investment and processing in Africa, we are also into trading, and also we are closely working with farmers for a number of things, including for a lot of sustainability initiatives, which my whole sustainability team is here. So what is needed to be done is a fine blend. This is one of my first point probably. There should be a fine blend between what you want to allow to trade versus what you want to allow to process. You know, we might have a ideal, a long-term target. We want to process the entire cargo. Probably it's a journey. It's a journey which you have to embark on. We have to gradually move on. What it serves is that if you go in that gradual journey, the farmer is not harmed. Now today we are in a situation where all of a sudden we impose certain policies abruptly. Let us say we want to completely ban the raw cashew export. I'm not commenting on any particular country. I'm saying it's a broad policy, which means you are also pushing a minimum price to the farmer. So as against the classic example of East Africa, where a farmer can earn anything beyond $1,000 plus dollars per ton, which is $1 plus for a kg of cashew, versus a minimum price which could be less than half a dollar. I think the answer is very simple. Farmer stimulates to grow more when he is paid more. Very simple. I believe that's a simple definition. And we have some classic example where we imposed it, and today we don't see any cargo coming out of that country. If I have to quote an example, probably Kenya. I do know that Kenya has land restrictions. 1/3 of the land is only arable, and all those things are there on the back end, but this is also a fact. on the other side, when you impose this policy, when traders also come and pay, I do know that it can be something like initial period could be for the processor who can buy and subsequently for traders. I think this will give a wide chance even for these people who want to pay better price to the farmer. And end of the day, I believe Africa, the way they have come so far, should be aiming to probably produce 5 million tons by 2030 from 3 million today. And you just enable farmer to grow more and more, and price is paid by the, whatever the compensation for the local low price will be paid by the traders. Okay, I think there should be a fine blend between these two. The second and third point I'll just quickly try to touch upon. When the policy is there for our export, allowing, not allowing after a certain period of time, I think it has to be much more consistent, which will allow everyone to plan. The market also can figure out and plan accordingly. Otherwise, you will always see the huge volatility, which I think is your starting point, which might end up in benefiting somebody, maybe end up in, bankrupting others. So possibly that's one other point. Third point, as an investor in Africa, I would think the classic examples of Cote d'Ivoire or some other countries where the processing is supported in a great way. I think that example has to be picked by some more countries. Probably the processing side of it probably will expand in Africa. The fourth and fifth point will be much more focused on sustainability practices across the value chain. I think that's the future. It has been the topic of discussion so far. We will face the regulatory obligations where the consumption markets will not take the conventional cashew kernel. So that's another possibility. I think the last point could be also to encourage Africa to consume cashew kernel. I think it's a potential future market because the standard of living of Africa is coming up, and they will be at par with probably the developing countries, because they are developing. Some are underdeveloped probably. They are developing. I think they will have bigger, the category which can afford to spend. So I think between the lower and higher end, the medium category is coming in. I think that's the other point. Probably this will be my broad points around that.
Thank you. Indeed, developing prosperity is a way to stimulate consumption. So the more value addition, the more prosperity, eventually the more consumption. It's very interesting what you say, Vasudev, and it occurs to me that maybe if anyone starts out on a journey, the first thing they need to decide is where they want to go. Do we know where we want to go? Do we have any shared vision of where this journey ends up? That's a question I would ask. Berte, coming to you, from your point of view, what should the priorities for cashew policy be?
Thank you very much, Jim. And I would come in from a perspective of a development organization working for GIZ-MOVE. And principally also we are working in Africa, so let me also allow me this bias towards Africa a little bit. First of all, I would like to say I like very much your presentation in the morning, the balancing elephant, and I think that is really so important that we have reliable, predictable and well communicated policies based on a good data and information basis. This is so important to attract investment, and investment still is needed quite a lot in the African cashew sector. And I also welcome very much the presentation of ETG in the morning with regard to sustainability. That was a great presentation, and I think that shows a bit the vision of the sector, where the sector should go to. So it was a really good start of the conference, really, and I think that is for me, for our organization, and I think that should be a priority, to increase the sustainability of the value chain, and not only of production, but of the value chain in total. And here I would also like to say that Africa has a comparative advantage there. The European market is asking for more sustainability. We heard it already in the morning. A lot of legislation is coming up, EU DAR, CSDD, and others. And Africa is more close to the European market. We have there only 18 shipping days to Europe instead of 45, 16 shipping days if it goes through Asia. And traceability also is possible in Africa. We have already some interesting examples there to create traceable value chains. And also certification is an important issue. And let me share maybe, let me have a look at other sectors as well. I'm coming from the cocoa sector. I was working 20 years in the cocoa sector, which is really a lot more advanced in sustainability than in the cashew sector. I was surprised that when I have been here last year in the World Cashew Conferences, sustainability was not really an issue. This year it changed really. I saw there's a special session on it, your introduction in the morning and so on. So I see this change. And for example, yeah, certification is an issue, fair trade certification, organic, but also human rights due diligence. Have a look at child labor. Have a look at how the worker situation is in the companies. All that is something which is required from European legislation and should be really standards to look at in the cashew value chain. Look at the carbon footprints, carbon emissions, etc. Yeah, and learning from other sectors. For example, I would like to mention a small example from Ghana. Ghana has established a national traceability system in cocoa, and Ghana is now doing a study initiated by the Cocoa Board, how to look how this system can benefit also other sectors, and cashew is part of this study. No? So here the cocoa sector is reaching out to the cashew sector, but I think we should also look at lessons we can learn from the cocoa sector. And let me mention a last point, that is the regional harmonization of policies. And this I would like to address also especially to West Africa. Have a look how you can harmonize your policy. For example, a policy with regard to standard, quality standards, certification, etc. Here, for example, I would like also to mention an example from cocoa. This is a regional standard on cocoa, African Regional Standard, ARS 1000, which in cocoa was already initiated 10 years ago. They started working on this joint regional initiative. So these are all examples you can learn from. And yeah, with regard to this harmonization, let me share also an example from my own work, from the work of GIZ. So we are supporting research activities in Africa, and especially supporting projects where several countries are contributing on different issues, on sustainability issues, on pests and diseases and so on. And we would like to enhance this inter-regional or this supra-regional collaboration among the countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're hearing about market access, we're hearing about sustainability, we're hearing about success. African processing is growing 20% per annum. African production is growing at 5.5% per annum. We've heard a lot of comments about these things. I want to come back to our regulators, and we're going to start in the world's leading producing country. What's your reaction to the comments, Mamadou Berte?
Je pense qu'il est important que les participants anglophones prennent les CACs, parce que je vais répondre, je dirais, à tout ce qui est comme critique, parce que ce sont des critiques. Je note que je vais vous poser la question de savoir pourquoi on régule un marché. Quand un pays décide de réguler, c'est bien entendu pour un objectif précis. Je vous ai dit que la Côte d'Ivoire est résolument engagée dans la transformation de tous ses produits. Ce n'est pas seulement l'anacarde, c'est le cacao, l'EVA, tous les autres produits. Et quand je regarde un peu toutes les interventions, même l'intervention de James, c'est vrai qu'on a une régulation qui a été mise en place que certains vont considérer comme pas trop commode, pas normal, mais pour nous c'est normal. Pour nous c'est normal parce que c'est juste pour atteindre un objectif. Et je dis ici, que ce soit l'Inde, que ce soit le Vietnam, qui sont nos premiers pays, je vais dire destinataires, ils sont à 100% de transformation. 100%, ils produisent aussi. Et ils sont à 100%. Nous, aujourd'hui, nous sommes pour cette année 2024 à 35%. Mais il fallait quelque chose. Si on laissait toute notre production partir, mais c'est clair qu'on ne serait pas à 35%. Donc je voulais que vraiment on soit très honnête vis-à-vis l'un de l'autre. Il faut comprendre que les choses ont changé. Au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire, j'ai bien dit, c'est objectif 50% 2030. Donc, si vous regardez la production de la Côte d'Ivoire, vous pouvez calculer, les 50% vont rester en Côte d'Ivoire jusqu'en 2030. Ça, c'est clair. Maintenant, ce qu'on peut vous dire, c'est que nous sommes dans un marché, nous sommes des partenaires, et je fais notre mea culpa pour dire ce qui s'est passé l'année dernière, c'est qu'on avait tous constaté que la production a baissé, partout. Dans le monde entier, la production avait baissé. Et il s'est trouvé qu'à un certain moment où on était dans la dynamique, on a vu que nos transformateurs locaux n'allaient pas avoir du produit. Donc, attendez, un gouvernement responsable qui a décidé de faire la promotion pour que des investisseurs viennent s'installer, je ne comprends pas pourquoi on va aller laisser toute la production partir. C'est justement cela. Donc maintenant, qu'est-ce qu'on va faire? On sait que ça a impacté des exportateurs, par exemple, parce qu'ils avaient pris des engagements par-ci, par-là. Nous, on a pris la décision de ne plus suspendre pendant que nous sommes en train de travailler. Donc ça, c'est clair, on ne va pas le faire. Tant que nous sommes en train de travailler, le jour où on va dire aux exportateurs, commencez à payer, vous êtes informés, vous savez à quel moment vous rentrez, vous payez. Donc vraiment, je voulais qu'on soit clair là-dessus. Et pour nous, c'est vraiment de contribuer. Je pense que ce qu'il faut regarder maintenant en termes de partenariat, c'est plus des échanges pour que nous, et nous on a commencé cela, nous sommes en train de faire la réhabilitation de nos plantations pour que nous ayons plus un bon rendement à l'hectare, pour que nous offrons plus la meilleure qualité. La meilleure qualité, non seulement pour nos transformateurs nationaux, mais pour aussi les transformateurs des autres pays. C'est ce que nous sommes en train de faire maintenant. Je pense que nous devons orienter, je veux dire, toute cette discussion autrement, ne pas être focus seulement sur la politique intérieure de chaque pays. Parce que chacun ici a sa politique intérieure. Et je souhaite que la politique intérieure de la Côte d'Ivoire soit respectée. Merci.
Thank you very much. Forster, Ghana's at the beginning maybe of a journey on cashew policy. What are you taking from this conversation?
Great. Thank you. I think I really understand the position of Cote d'Ivoire being a lead in terms of production and also the policies they have in place to process at least 35% of what they produce. The case of Ghana is a bit different. We produce almost less than 10% of what we produce, though we are not the market leader. It means that 90% of what we produce, we export them. And so therefore, as part of sustainability for us, we really want to look at the demand, what the market demand is in terms of what the market requires of Ghana in terms of its exports. So for us, we have been looking more of building issues around sustainability. And what we mean by sustainability in our case, first of all, we are looking at economic sustainability where we are enhancing productivity and also competitiveness of the farmer. Because if we are interested in remuneration of the farmer, then we have to look at what the farmer has to do to address issues to be able to meet the market demand. So that's what we are looking at. And I think what Berte talked about, sustainability around climate, we are very key about that because currently Ghana is adopting a system where there's agroforestry interventions where we can address issues around adaptation and mitigation for greenhouse gas emissions. and also making sure that environmentally we are sound. Because if we are going to target European market when we start processing, very soon European market will ensure that we meet the EUDR. And so these are things that we are putting in place. And now when it comes to social sustainability, you realize that cocoa board currently are being tagged for child labor when it comes to cocoa. So in the other tree crops, especially in cashew, we're also looking at how we address child labor issues. As I speak, government is investing through another project to look at a national survey that seeks to look at prevalence rates of child labor across all the value chains, including cashew. Because we are preparing ourselves to put our best foot forward for the other markets, European market. Maybe Asian market may not be so much interested in other social and environmental issues. But what about when it comes to European market, where Ghana is looking at processing at least, moving processing from 10% to 25%. Where are we going to sell? Europe market is very close to us. So we need to put these sustainability measures in place. Thank you.
Thank you. So looking at this problem of reconciling different interests, it is the right of a country to develop. It is the right of a country to regulate their own cashew sector. They also have to look after their clients. From a Vietnamese point of view, how do we reconcile these issues? What would be your suggestion? And then
thank you. Yeah, I totally with my friend comment and suggestion such that we should open the market. Yeah, the market-oriented economy is the key point here, and we should do everything. The harder we work, the luckier we get towards the market, not towards the production only, because everything, the final thing, the final end user decide everything. We cannot decide the production without the consumption. So that's why we have to look forward, and we listen more from the Western consumer. We see a limited attendee at the meeting who are the kernel buyer. Yeah, limited. We should have more buyer from Western and American buyer to come and to listen from the producing country and processing country, Vietnam and India. And we should work together. Because this is not a cake for only one person to eat. This is global. It's in global scale. And everyone has a share of this cake. I know. And we cannot win by myself. Yeah, we cannot win, only one. We should, everyone win-win. And everyone rich and richer. That's the key point here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So let's, we're running out of time here as always. And we've got a lot of different policies, a lot of different initiatives and plenty of ideas. And I'm curious most of all about how do we make all these work together? Berte, in terms of harmonizing policy, working together, how do you see it? What's your experience from other businesses? How can this be done?
Yes, I think for harmonizing policies, it's very important to create spaces where you meet, where the policy makers meet, where they can exchange and so on and discuss policies. Because I think for a really successful implementation of policies, it is really important that you incorporate your neighbors also. We saw it, for example, that policies are successful if you communicate well, if you are reliable, and if that doesn't take the case, if that is really done very quickly without a good basis, then it is probably, it can also damage the sector. We saw that, and therefore I think it's so important to have those platforms where policymakers meet, where they discuss the policies, where they look also at the unintended effects which could occur, and so on. And I would just mention that some of those platforms are existing already. We have, for example, the CICC organization which can be strengthened or can take up this task to create these platforms even a bit stronger. We know they're doing already webinars on policies and so on. No? So, for example, also we from GIZ side, we can support this regional conciliation and meetings and interaction, for example. I think that is really important. And analyze good, have a good databases, a good information basis, analyze well, and look what could be unintended effects. Yeah, so that I would like to recommend.
There's a lot in there about communication, really. First, if you could recommend one thing to regulators and policymakers, you know, I'm not going to make your life easy.
You know,
if you could recommend one thing, what would it be?
I would only say that, you know, it is partnership. It is not anybody's individual proposition that this is the only way to work. I think we do recognize the country has its own priorities, and you know, they have to blend that with the what it will end up in being an impact to the stakeholders. I think stakeholders' interest, if it is considered, and as Berte said, that to minimize the unintended impact of it. You know, you can't zero it. It has to just be a minimization. When the farmers, the investors, the market, and of course the country's interests are blended, and the policies are a bit more, informed, or some level of discussion, interactions, and maybe opinion seeking, and eventually make it perfect, would be the great thing. Though it is really looks idealistic, probably somewhere around that line, there should be conversation, and there should be mutual sharing of ideas, which might benefit in a great way. And Africa is going to be the future for cashew, as there's nothing much land left in most of the world. So Africa has a huge role, I believe, just that while they're focusing on their local processing, increasing the footprint of processing, their production can simultaneously increase, and we can all live probably the markets like India or Vietnam and Africa can live harmoniously. That's, I think, the only way. Just dialogue, discussion, interactions, ideas, sharing ideas. And I don't think there is one single solution to say that this is the best solution. This should be a blend of everything, I believe.
We need to talk. We need to communicate.
We need to talk, yeah.
We need to share information. From your point of view, one recommendation for policy makers and regulators in Africa?
Well, I personally think all the stakeholders, including the regulators, the policy makers, we have to think for the overall development of the sector as a whole. Because if the sector grows, everyone in the value chain grows. No one can grow in isolation. We are all interdependent, interconnected. So we should think of a major, broader objective that we want this sector to come up, to grow, and continue to grow. And then only everyone in the value chain will grow. Listen to each other, understand each other's priorities, address their concern also, and at the same time work towards the betterment of all the stakeholders in the value chain, starting from the farmers, in the middle in the value chain, and also ultimately to the consumers. Even if one channel is missed, nothing can happen. The ultimate objective will not be met. So we should work overall development of the sector as a whole. Then only this development will come.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to the discussion which actually emerged from yesterday about vision. How can we find the things we agree on? So I think we all agree we need more cashew nuts. We all agreed that each country has the right to develop its value addition. We all agree we need to sell these cashew nuts. We heard earlier that inflation has eroded the values paid to farmers in recent years, which is interesting. We went through 15 years of farm gate prices going up and up and up. They trebled between 2003 and 2015 in West Africa. And relatively speaking, since, we don't see that same growth because we're not seeing improvement in yields. And we're seeing very volatile markets. So how do we come to a vision? I'm looking at the questions. They're great questions, but they're a bit specific. They're a bit... Let's talk about managing and sharing knowledge. So Berte, there's a question for you about how does Coombe Cashew manage the sharing of knowledge?
Yeah, we can contribute to that. No? So the knowledge has to be generated, I think, in the different countries with the different actors and so on. Our interest is to contribute to the dissemination of that knowledge. We do that through supporting conferences, websites, to elaborating fact sheets and so on, to support creating platforms and so on. So we are open to requests from our partners if you think we can do more there, but that is a very important area of what we can do to support creating knowledge and support documenting knowledge and interchanging knowledge.
I noticed in Mozambique, every year you send me this really great report that covers what happened in the year. What do you do in Mozambique to share knowledge about the sector?
Thank you very much. First of all, we have worked with the ACA and GIZ regarding the project and cooperation to improve and share technologies around the stakeholders. We have signed a memorandum of understanding with Tanzania to improve our cashew seedlings. But when we talk about sharing database, we have a system of information in Mozambique where we collect the data from the local districts and the province, and then we generate at the national level. For instance, I'm going to talk about a system of commercialization where we first forecast our production, and then we collect the market information per province, and then we generate nationally. And when we want to present our reports, we have not to talk about Mozambique cashew production or output or market output, but we have to collect information with Tanzania, West Africa. How we do that? For us, it's challenging, but we used to read the cashew information, and we have also Nkalo information. We also receive information from Jim, and we talk with the focal point of a national organization in West Africa, so that we have a view of what is the market trend to better analyze the cashew price reference, as well the tendency of the FOB price. So we have put in place a regulatory internal framework to collate databases with other countries. But I think the ACA could play an important role by sharing information. As well, India and Vietnam, I will give an example. We export raw cashewnut and raw cashewnut basically for India and Vietnam, but it's important that we have those information as well. The quantity of raw cashewnut being exported from Mozambique to India, if we have monthly, is going to be important as well from Vietnam, because it's help to reduce the fluctuation along the value chain. And also, I would like to express my gratitude to the Tanzania, because we start to share information, it's helped a lot to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a good note to finish on because we're running out of time anyway. Sharing. So what is coming to me is that sharing information, and I have always found that sharing information is the best way to start a conversation. What starts as sending someone a market report finishes as a close relationship. A webinar with 500 people on sharing information is a key to a conversation. Communication is the way toward understanding. And that's coming across very clear from you all. Big question that I'm getting out of this is, how do we fit all of those good intentions and good ideas together? That's a question we can't answer right now. But it's important to ask the question before we look for the answer. Speaking of questions, thank you very much for your questions. I see a lot of the questions would be better asked, for example, in the production session, which will come up later. And I wish we had time to go through these in detail, but we don't. So I'm going to close the session. I want to thank our panelists. I want you to thank our panelists. It's not easy to come up and talk and answer and be put on the spot. They've done a great job. Thank you all very much indeed. Please show your appreciation.